Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The morning I almost died, my mother was wearing her good pearls. I remember that detail with the kind of clarity that only comes from trauma. The way certain moments burn themselves into your memory, with such precision that decades later you can still smell the lavender perfume she dabbed behind her ears every Sunday. Still hear the soft click of her heels on the hardwood floor of Grandma Edith's hallway. Still see the pearls catching the winter light that fell through the tall windows of that old Victorian house on Clement Street. I was 31 years old. It was 2 weeks after my grandmother's funeral, and I was standing at the top of a staircase that had 16 steps. I know it was 16 because I counted them on the way down. Let me back up, because a story like this one doesn't begin at the bottom of a staircase. It begins much earlier in the particular geography of a family that has always loved money more than it loved its children. My name is Nora. I am the middle child of three, sandwiched between my brother Garrett, who is 4 years older than me, and my sister Pippa, who is 6 years younger. We grew up in a comfortable house in a comfortable suburb with parents who wore comfort like armor and called it love. My father, Raymond, was a real estate attorney. My mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who volunteered for every school committee but somehow made you feel when you skinned your knee or came home crying that your pain was a minor inconvenience to her schedule. Grandma Edith was different. Edith was my father's mother, and she was the kind of woman who seemed to have been assembled from an earlier, sturdier era, sharp-tongued, soft-hearted, with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that always smelled faintly of the garden. She called things what they were. She made pie from scratch. She kept a journal every single day of her adult life and stacked the finished volumes in a cedar chest at the foot of her bed. And she told me once when I was about 9 years old that those journals were the truest thing she owned. More honest than anything I ever said out loud, she told me, pressing a cup of chamomile into my hands. That's where I kept the real Edith. I loved her completely and without reservation, which is a rare thing in families like mine. When Grandma Edith got sick, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in September, gone by November, the vultures began to circle before she'd even stopped eating solid food. I watched my father become solicitous in a way he never was, calling her every evening, driving up on weekends to help around the house. Garrett, who hadn't visited in 3 years, suddenly appeared with his wife and 2 kids for a very warm Thanksgiving. Pippa sent flowers every week, which would have been touching if she hadn't also spent Grandma Edith's last coherent Sunday asking pointed questions about the cedar chest. I drove up every weekend too, but I came to sit with her, to read to her, to hold her hand when the pain was bad. I came because she was my grandmother and I loved her and she was dying, and that was reason enough. She knew the difference. 3 days before she passed, she asked everyone to leave the room except me. She was propped up on pillows, barely a shadow of herself, but her eyes were still sharp as ever behind those wire-rimmed glasses. "Nora," she said, "I want you to know that I see you. I have always seen you." "I know, Grandma. The house goes to Raymond. That's already done. That's the law. But there are things that aren't about the law." She reached under her pillow and pressed something into my palm. It was a small brass key, old, with a circular bow and a long, thin barrel. The cedar chest. "When the time comes, you take what's in there. Don't let them tell you otherwise." I closed my fingers around the key. "Okay, promise me." "I promise." She died 47 hours later on a Tuesday morning, with the winter sun coming through the curtains and a cardinal sitting on the bare branch outside her window. I like to think she chose the moment. The funeral was civil, which is to say that everyone was performing grief for an audience of neighbors and church friends while doing rapid calculations behind their eyes. My father accepted condolences with the right measure of somber dignity. My mother floated through the reception in her good pearls, pressing hands and accepting casseroles. Garrett stood near the door, the way men do when they want to look like they're holding everything together. I sat next to the cedar chest for most of the reception. I don't know why. It felt like the right thing to do. Nobody mentioned the key. 2 weeks later, my father called a family meeting at Grandma Edith's house. He said it was to sort through her belongings before the estate attorney finalized everything. What he meant was that now that the legal dust had settled, the house, the modest savings account, the car, everyone wanted to pick through what remained. Assigned dollar values to memory, I drove up with the key in my jacket pocket. The house smelled different without her. Closed up, slightly stale, the garden beginning its winter dieback visible through the kitchen window. We sat around the table, me, my parents, Garrett and his wife Leanne, Pippa, and my father produced a legal pad and suggested we go room by room. "What about the cedar chest?" Pippa asked. She said it like it was casual. She'd been practicing that casualness. "We'll get to it," my father said. "Grandma said it was Nora's," I said. The temperature in the room dropped. My father set down his pen with the careful deliberateness of a man constructing a response. "Your grandmother was ill, Nora. She wasn't always clear-headed. Was clear-headed when she gave me the key, 3 days before she died. There's no provision in the will. The will covers the house and the accounts. She told me specifically that the chest was outside of that it was mine." I put the key on the table. She pressed this into my hand herself. My mother's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Garrett and Leanne exchanged a look that was an entire conversation. Pippa stared at the key the way I imagine shipwreck survivors stare at lifeboats. "We should discuss this as a family," my father said. "I am discussing it as family. I'm telling you what Grandma Edith told me." We went around in circles for an hour. My father used legal language to imply that a deathbed verbal bequest was meaningless. My mother suggested, with exquisite passive aggression, that I was perhaps misremembering the exchange due to the emotional stress of the situation. Garrett said he just wanted what was fair. Leanne said nothing but nodded vigorously whenever Garrett spoke. Pippa said, "There might be something valuable in there, Nora. Don't you think we deserve to at least see?" She told me it was mine. "You can't prove that." No, I couldn't prove it. That was the point. We broke for a few minutes. Bathroom, fresh air. The polite fiction of de-escalation. I went upstairs to Grandma Edith's bedroom. The cedar chest sat at the foot of the empty bed, exactly where it had always been. I knelt in front of it, fit the key into the lock, and opened it. Journals. 43 of them I would later count, cloth-bound and leather-bound, and one that appeared to be wrapped in fabric from a dress, stacked with the same care she'd given everything, and underneath them, in an envelope with my name on it in her handwriting, a letter. I didn't read it there. I took it out, put it in my jacket pocket next to the now unneeded key, and closed the chest again. I was standing up when I heard them on the stairs. Here's what I remember: my mother's pearls, the particular quality of the winter light. The way Garrett's face looked, not angry exactly but resolved, the way a person looks when they've decided that something necessary is also acceptable. Here is what the police report would later say: that I sustained a fractured wrist, 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, and significant bruising across my left side. That I fell or was caused to fall down 16 stairs. That I was found at the bottom by Leanne, who had stayed in the kitchen and who called 911 with a shaking voice, and what I later understood was profound relief that she had an alibi. Here is what I know. I was standing at the top of the stairs with the letter in my pocket, and then I wasn't standing anymore. I don't know whose hands made contact. I was struck from behind, off balance, and then there was nothing but the falling, which is not like they describe it in movies, not slow motion, not peaceful. It is fast and chaotic, and each impact is a separate violence, and the only thought I had somewhere in the middle of it was a strange and furious no, not fear, not pain, not yet. Just no, a hard, clear, complete refusal. I landed on the hardwood floor of the entryway. The chandelier above me swam. I heard Leanne scream. I heard from upstairs a silence that told me everything. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent light and careful hands. Leanne rode in the ambulance holding my uninjured hand, and she didn't say much, but at one point she leaned close and whispered, "I didn't know they were going to do that. I swear I didn't know." I looked at her. "Okay," I said. "Tell them that. I'll tell them whatever you need." I closed my eyes. The concussion made everything feel like a radio tune, slightly wrong, sounds too loud, thoughts slipping sideways. But one thing stayed fixed and clear in my mind: the way Grandma Edith's eyes had been clear even at the end. The letter in my pocket. Still there, still mine. My parents and Garrett arrived at the hospital 2 hours after I did. They brought a story about me tripping, about the old runner on the stairs being loose, about how thank God I hadn't been more seriously hurt. My father spoke to the attending physician with the warm authority of a man accustomed to being believed. My mother stood at my bedside and held my hand and looked at me with an expression she had probably practiced in the car on the way over. "You gave us such a fright," she said. I looked at her pearls. I thought about Grandma Edith's hands, the weight of that small key. "I'm sure I did," I said. I filed the police report from my hospital bed, with a nurse as witness and my phone recording the conversation, because I had become, in the space of 16 stairs, a different kind of person, the kind who documents things. I had already called a friend who was a family law attorney, speaking in a low voice during the 20 minutes my family had stepped out to get coffee. I had taken photographs of my injuries. I had written down everything I remembered in the Notes app on my phone in precise chronological order while it was still fresh, and I had read the letter. Grandma Edith's handwriting was small and precise, the handwriting of someone who had filled 43 journals and never wasted a word. The letter was 3 pages long. It described, in the careful language of a woman who had observed her family for decades, exactly what she expected might happen after her death. She named names. She recalled specific conversations she had overheard, discussions between my father and Garrett about the estate, speculation about the value of certain items she owned, a comment my mother had made that Edith had written in her journal the same night she heard it. She had included with the letter 2 things: a signed and notarized statement attesting that the cedar chest and all its contents were bequeathed to me, Nora, witnessed by her neighbor Constance Marsh, and a note directing me to journal number 31, page 47, where she had recorded a specific incident from 12 years prior that she believed I deserved to know. I won't detail that incident here. It is not mine alone, and some truths belong to their time. What I will say is that the letter was not a bombshell. It was not a revelation. It was, in a way, simply confirmation, the documentation of things I had always sensed but never had the language for, written in my grandmother's clear hand, dated and notarized and witnessed. She had known. She had seen all of it, and she had prepared accordingly. "I have always seen you," she'd told me. She wasn't just talking about love. The investigation took several months. The detectives were thorough and, to my surprise, kind. One of them had a grandmother herself, she told me once off the record, and there was something in her eyes when she said it. Leanne cooperated fully. The loose runner on the stairs story collapsed quickly under the weight of the hospital's documentation, my recorded testimony, and the letter, which the detectives found both credible and, I think, quietly devastating. My father hired an attorney. Of course he did. He knew exactly which ones to call. Garrett hired one too. My mother maintained in every interview that she had been in the hallway and had not seen what happened, which was technically accurate in the way that many lies are technically accurate. The charges were not dismissed. That surprised some people who knew my family, people who had seen my father's careful Sunday morning face, who had accepted casseroles from my mother, who thought of my brother as a steady, reasonable man. It surprised them because they had always taken the performance for the person. That is the particular danger of families like mine. They are so good at the performance, but a fractured wrist, 2 cracked ribs, and a concussion leave marks that performances can't explain away. I kept the chest. It sits in my apartment now in the corner of my bedroom under the window where the morning light falls across it first thing. I haven't read all 43 journals yet. I take them slowly, one at a time, because each one is a conversation with a woman I loved, and I am not in a hurry to reach the end of them. The one she mentioned in her letter, number 31. Page 47, I read in one sitting on a January night with tea gone cold beside me, and I cried in a way I hadn't cried since she died. Not from grief, or not only from grief, from the particular relief of being witnessed. Of having someone say, I saw what happened, I recorded it, I kept it for you. That is what the chest was. Not valuables, not antiques, not anything that could be appraised and divided and fought over. Just the truth of a woman's life, kept carefully, offered to the one person she trusted to receive it. My family fractured in the aftermath. Predictably, the way things fracture when the structure holding them together was pretense. I don't speak to my father or Garrett. My mother sent me a card at Christmas that I haven't opened. Pippa called me once from a private number and said she was sorry, and then we sat in silence for a long moment, and then she hung up. I don't know what to do with Pippa yet. I may never know. I have a therapist now. Her name is Dr. Annan, and she's precise and warm in equal measure, qualities I notice because they remind me of someone. We have talked over many sessions about the particular confusion of growing up loved badly, about the way families teach you to accept certain stories about yourself, stories about what you deserve, what you're permitted to want, whose word counts and whose doesn't. About how sometimes it takes 16 stares and a letter from a dead woman to understand that you were never the problem. That's the thing nobody tells you about families like mine. The cruelty is rarely operatic. It doesn't announce itself. It wears good pearls and speaks in reasonable tones and frames its violence as concern, its greed as fairness, its coldness as practicality. You spend years doubting your own perception, wondering if you're being dramatic, asking yourself whether what you experienced was really as bad as it felt. And then one day you're at the bottom of a staircase counting the steps on the way down, and the answer is very clear. Last spring, on what would have been Grandma Edith's 83rd birthday, I drove back to Clement Street. The house has new owners now, a young family. I could see a bike on the porch and a garden that someone was clearly trying to revive. I didn't stop. I just drove past slowly, the way you do when a place is no longer yours but you still carry it somewhere. I had one of her journals with me. I'd been reading it on lunch breaks, number 17 from the year I was born. She wrote about that year with characteristic plainness: the weather, the garden, a neighbor's difficult divorce, a recipe for apple cake that she liked. And on the day I was born, a single entry: Raymond's girl arrived today. They've named her Nora. I held her for a long time. She looked right at me. She's going to be all right. I read that sitting in my car outside the old house in the thin April sunlight, and I thought she was right. Eventually, she was right. I'm going to be all right. I put the journal back in my bag, started the car, and drove home to the chest.